Welcome to the final session of the 2025 Global Leadership Speaker Series, proudly presented by the Center for Global Partnerships and Learning at Pepperdine University, the Graduate School of Education and Psychology. I'm Lina Safa, the Research and Grants Manager at the Center, and it's a pleasure to close out this inspiring series with such a meaningful event tonight. This year, our theme was innovation, motivation, and global leadership. The theme has guided rich conversations with thought leaders from around the world. And tonight, we conclude with a special students and alumni panel featuring Dr. Pete Solis, Shatha Alkaun, Byung-Sun So, and Maritza Sosa Nieves, all outstanding scholar practitioners and researchers from the PhD in Global Leadership and Change program who are living, working, and leading on a global scale. I would like to take a moment also to recognize and thank Dr. Gabriela Miramontes, the director of the center, and our entire team in the room here for their leadership and dedication in making this series possible. And now it's my honor to pass it over to Dr. Azia Ghazi, also a PhD student and an alumna of JSCP and longtime contributor to the Center for Global Partnerships and Learning. Dr. Ghazi will be moderating and facilitating tonight's panel. Dr. Ghazi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lina, for your wonderful introduction and to introduce all of me and our panelists. So we're ready to begin. I'm going to go ahead and moderate our panel. We have a series of questions that we'll be asking regarding global leadership, cultural insight, innovation, action, staying motivated, the PhD journey, leadership growth, and forward-thinking reflections. And it's not just PhD. We do have one of our panelists who's also in the EDD program. So we want to make sure we bring in all of all of our students and alum that are coming from both of our doctorate programs as well, that would have, really wonderful insights in regards to leadership and just really how did they begin their own journey here and motivating themselves. By the way, apologies if you hear a buzzing noise in the background. It's my air conditioning that for some reason is not turning off and I don't know what to do. So I'm just gonna let it keep buzzing. So hopefully it's not, you all can't hear it, but if you do, my apologies. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is I want our panelists to introduce themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Dr. Pete Solis, and then I'm going to go from my right all around on my screen. So Dr. Pete, please introduce yourself.
Hi. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be with all the panelists. I know I've been on a panel with at least two of the members before, so it's an honor to speak with you again. I'm calling from Athens, Greece at lovely 3:30 in the morning, so I'm sorry if there's a little bit of a delay in my response. I'm in Athens as the director of the business program of the Hellenic American College, but I also am a practitioner. I work as an advisor for two consulting firms. One is Goldratt Research Labs, and the other one is BizOps. One's in supply chain management optimization, the other one's in casino gaming. So looking forward to speaking with everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Pete. Shatha.
Hello, everyone. I think I'm going to do the introduction one more time, just in case anybody joined. So my name is Shada. I'm a PhD student in the Global Leadership and Change program. And it's my final, I have my final classes this week, hopefully finishing dissertation soon. I'm also based in Dubai, originally from Saudi Arabia, moving there very soon, or moving back. I work in the space of sustainability reporting, especially in ESG, and with a special with a special focus on small and medium enterprises.
Thank you so much, Shatha. I appreciate that. So good to wait. What time is it in Dubai, by the way?
I'm just ahead of 4:30.
Oh,
4:30 a.m.
Okay, your 4:30 Pete's at what, 3:30?
Yeah, we're very close.
Very close. Oh my
Very
God, thank you so much for being up so early in the morning for all of you and being here. Actually, and the funny thing is you are all in Tuesday, April 8th, and we're still in Monday, April 7th. It's kind of mind-boggling when we think about that. And then we have Byung-Sun So.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I was born in South Korea and grown up there, but I moved to the Philippines and I stayed there for 5 years as one of the trainers of Missionary Training Center internationally. And I moved to the United States in 2010. And I'm learning on education company, bringing American education system to Asian countries. Especially, I'm working with the local governments of South Korea, making an extension campus of Cedar Canyon School in Los Angeles. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Byung-Sun. And finally, Maritza Sosa Nieves.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good morning for Dr. Solis and Shata. My name is Maritza Sosa Nieves. I'm an EDD student in organizational leadership. I completed all my coursework. So I'm currently working on my dissertation, hoping to be done by next spring. Most importantly, I currently work in local government. I've spent the last 20 years in government. I currently work for the city of Pomona. So I'm in California. In Los Angeles County, and I currently serve as the assistant to the city manager, just overseeing various special projects citywide. But also I'm a school board member for Los Nietos School District in Whittier, also in LA County. For me, it's just very important when it comes down to service, not only just to work in government, but to be able to give back to my community as well.
Wonderful.
Happy to be here.
We live close to each other. I'm in Orange
Yeah.
County, not far from Pomona or Whittier.
No, not far at all.
No, I love it. Okay, so we've got a really wonderful panel here for all of you, different parts of the world. They've got different types of experiences and different things that they're going to bring in. So we're going to go ahead and start with our first question. So the first question, and so it may not apply to all of you, but even if it doesn't, I think it would be a really great question for you all to answer. How has living and working internationally shaped the way you define leadership? So let me go ahead and repeat that. And I'll also put the question in the chat for all of you to know what the question is. The question is, oh, sorry, I'm putting it in the waiting room, participants. The question is, how has living and working internationally shaped the way you define leadership? So who would like to begin, or would you like for me to choose?
I'm okay with you choosing.
All right. I would actually love to Dr. Pete, I would love for you to actually answer first, just because I know that, you were in the program when you and I met, you're in a PhD
Mhm.
program, and then you actually moved to Greece. So yes, I would love for you to answer that question.
So I mean, my move to Greece was kind of unique. Let's say if we think about it like as an international thing, because my parents are Greek, so I have Greek nationality. So it wasn't too much of a cultural shift. And then growing up in a small Greek community in LA, there was, that learning curve too. But in my consulting practice, I've also done a lot of work internationally. Uh, in my mind, the definition of leadership is the mechanism to motivate, right? Like, how do you motivate someone? And the more you work internationally, you start realizing that different cultural sets require different sets of motivation, right? What people respond to could be different. And not saying that one, let's say country or society responds differently in a certain way. I think now that we've moved into this much more digital space, this much more open communication, that a lot more people have moved into the space of giving my opinion as opposed to like a hierarchy type of leadership.
All right. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for answering that. And I would like to ask Byung-Sun.
Yeah, as I explained, I lived in several different countries for many, many years. And also I love traveling or so-called backpack tour to some countries from my early 20th. So living internationally taught me that true leadership involves humility, and active listening, and cultural sensitivity. And it's about empowering diverse teams and embracing multiple perspectives, and also recognizing that effective leadership adapts contextually rather than imposing a single approach universally. So I want to emphasize humility first. And I will explain why it comes to me with my experience later.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And so with Maritza and Shata, would either of the two of you want to speak to this question?
I can go ahead. So, I mean, I'm going to take a little bit of shift in terms how you answer the question from the local team or the observers or the people who like look at these leaders. So, I mean, I feel like depending where you are and how you define leadership is like what leadership means to them. Some people look at a leader as a savior or a big brother or like kind of like the fatherly figure. So these kind of, depending how these communities or locals or kind of organization and kind of setup look at leaders, define what they need from you or how they need kind of to grow and move on. If you are very much reliant on somebody, a single person to kind of guide you, this becomes a very different where people are self-organized and more like needs more like a reference point to move forward in kind of decision making or initiative taking. So this is what I feel different between like this is my first observation in terms of how they interpret leadership or what is leadership in their eyes. And I think that's also defined how they move and how they change. If you are very much reliant on a singular person or a singular kind of reference point, that is really going to dictate how you move forward. Versus if you are a community that is empowered or kind of self-assembled or organized, you will move regardless. And leadership will more going to be somebody who is a companion that moves forward with you.
Love your answer. That's a great answer. And Maritza.
I just want to actually add and piggyback to what Shata said. I do agree that leadership, to me, it's not just about the title, but it's about creating these opportunities for others, right? Creating these or fostering these environments where everyone, at least in our community, can feel seen and valued and heard. I think that it's so important for us, you know, as leaders in our homes, in our communities, and at work, that you know that as leaders we actually lift others up, you know, lift them up as you climb up the ladder as well. I feel like when you give others those opportunities, and you're also allowing them those spaces to be able to grow and for them to also be leaders for other generations as they come up. I feel that just being in government for so long, it has kind of reinforced that it's so important to listen to just these different diverse voices and to be able to make decisions that reflect the collective, not just an individual. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the answers you've all provided in the different ways you define leadership and even just from your own background of where you're living and where you're working. Um, and so this leads me to another question that I wanted to ask, and I'm going to put it in the chat too. And this is it's important to, you know, when it comes to leadership and communication, right? We communicate across different lines, you know, nationally, locally, and also internationally or globally, right? And so, have you ever had a moment or a moment that you could share when cross-cultural communication significantly impacted your leadership, either in a positive way or as a lesson that you've learned? I will put this in the chat as well for everyone to see. But again, if you can share a moment when cross-cultural communication has significantly impacted your leadership, now either positively or as a lesson learned, it would be great to kind of know about that, just because we're defining what leadership means to us, living and working internationally for those who are international or have traveled, but it's the communication that sometimes could become an issue, or maybe we do a great job in it depending on how we're communicating. So, who would like to start with answering this question first?
I don't mind starting.
Oh.
Because this kind of goes back to my answer to the last question. Now,
Mhm.
depending on where culture lies on a spectrum, the way communication is far different. So, for an example, in Far Eastern cultures like Japanese or Chinese cultures, there is really no feedback loop between the leader and the follower. So, whenever I worked in Macau and I tell somebody, hey, what is your opinion? They would just agree with me. Well, that's not necessarily their real opinion. They would just assume that that's their role as the follower. And then as we go into like Western cultures, we talk to each other by the first name and like, hey Jim, how's work going? Like, you know, how's your personal life? So one thing that I had, which was kind of a learning curve, because the Greek that I learned wasn't necessarily educated. My parents didn't have really like a formal education, so going to Greece and starting to conduct meetings professionally, I didn't have the proper grammar that was needed in a much more proper society. So, for an example, in Greek, you have to speak in the plural, like, how are we doing today? Whenever you speak to elders or somebody that's above you. Also, using titles like Mr. President, yes, what do you believe? Which is very important. Like, I would never be in a meeting in the States and be like, Mr. President, how are you? So that was kind of a learning curve and something to adjust. But I found that my students appreciate when I give a much more of an American approach of saying, you could just call me Pete. Like the doctor ends at the door. You're getting your MBA right now. Eventually, you're going to be my colleague. And I kind of take that Pepperdine approach because I think that's kind of how some of my professors talked to me when I was in school. And so that was a little bit my experience.
And as you were talking, I saw Byung-sun like nod his head. So I want to know, you were nodding your head. Were you agreeing with him?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I want to emphasize on the question is cultural sensitivities. Like while I'm in the Philippines, I learned that assuming universal acceptance without considering cultural sensitivities can lead to serious misunderstandings. Like this experience taught me the importance of international cross-cultural dialogue. For example, it was happening exactly. A Korean missionary once jokingly said to a Filipino colleague, "I will kill you." Have you heard about "I will kill you"? That's like a joke among very friendly people in Korea. However, in the Philippines, a phrase that may be taken lightly in Korean among close friends, but they could imply a real threat, even requiring someone to prepare a coffin. When you say that you need to prepare a coffin. So that moment profoundly reshaped how I appreciate or approach leadership communication, emphasizing the need for empathy and cultural awareness, especially, and inclusive listening. So I think cultural sensitivity is very important as a leader globally.
I love you said something right now. You said inclusive listening. I'm putting that in the chat. I thought that was a really cool term. I've never heard of this term of inclusive listening, and I think that it makes so much sense, especially when, like you just said, to be able to have cultural sensitivity when speaking, knowing that if you're speaking to somebody who's from a different country or a different culture, and maybe they don't take what you think is light as lightly, right? They may take it seriously, or vice versa. That can actually be a very big deal in terms of how we come across in being able to communicate. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for the term of inclusive listening. I think that is an excellent term for us to all remember. Um, and so I would love to ask Maritza and Shata.
Go
Would you
ahead,
like-
Shata.
I'm just going to give an example here for like an incident or like something I was reflecting on. So many cases when you're in a room, you come from a culture, they come from a culture, but we're using a different culture to experience, to communicate. For example, I speak Arabic, they speak, for example, Mandarin, and we're trying to communicate in English. There's a lot of things that get lost in this conversation. Especially you're trying to reach, for example, you're trying to communicate, for example, Arabic terminology or ideas in an English way to a Mandarin speaking person who actually speaks a third language, or the English is his third language, for example. So that's, I find, always I approach that very carefully. And the way I do it is actually I try to think in my cult, like whatever comes out has to resemble the original culture, because regardless of the words you use, it needs to reflect the original source, even if it's in a different language. So this is something I always, even within my team, is like, be careful how you interpret and translate things, because it can come across a little bit differently depending on who you're talking to. Sometimes there's like filler words or kind of gestures you do. That's something you also have to be very, very careful when you're in that situation. So I always try to be extremely aware and sensitive when in these conversations. But also do a little bit research, learn a little bit more about the person you're sitting with, the culture, the norms. That really, really helps a lot. Formal, what you just mentioned, formally addressing somebody is very critical sometimes. And even if you're writing emails as well, it's really important to be aware about how you address people, how you start your emails, how you end them. Many culture, we may call it in here formalities, but that is like basic ethical kind of approach for anybody in a different culture. So we call it formal, they call it the normal. So that's something we have to also kind of consider when we're dealing in these kind of spaces or circumstances.
My example is just related to being a school board member. I live in and serve a community that's predominantly Spanish-speaking community. Spanish is my first language, and I was an ESL student for all my grade school years. ESL, English as a second language. So I also try to be very sensitive to that. I know that we often conduct business just in English because that's the normal thing to do. But when it comes down to our community, especially when we're adopting policies or trying to bring about change that's going to impact our students and their families, I always make it a point to make sure that we do have interpretation, or if I'm running the meeting, I can do both. I'll do it in English and in Spanish, because I think it's so important to be able to offer that space for our families. And I don't want a language barrier to ever deter them from coming to these meetings, from participating in these meetings, because ultimately this is about our students and them, are the community that we serve.
I love all of the answers that you've all provided. I think it's very, very imperative for us to really be aware of that, to be aware of language, culture, and all the things that come in, and how do we interpret, how do we speak to others, and how do we, even body language, right? Even body language. I mean, even though I was born and raised here, but being Pakistani Indian, I understand exactly, how that is. Being that in our culture is the same thing. If we see something that seems really, disrespectful, right? It can be taken in a way where it's like, oh no, I don't want to work with this person or this leader because they're not understanding our ways or how we are and stuff like that. So I completely understand that. I think that's such a great thing. So I loved all of your answers. We're going to move on to the next ones. And I think we have some really good questions here for all of you. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about um, about innovation, because I think innovation is part of the theme for global leadership, right? that we have going on for this event. And so I would love to ask, what role does failure or experimentation play in how you approach innovation as a leader? Again, I will repeat this question. I will put it in the chat here. What role does failure or experimentation play in how you approach innovation as a leader? And so I think I'm gonna start right now with Maritza, and then we're gonna kind of go around the other way.
I think that no one wants to fail, right? But at the same time, I feel that we can't be afraid to fail. I feel that sometimes change happens and innovation happens when we step outside of our comfort zone. I feel that for the most part, whenever something doesn't go as planned or when we fail at something, I see it more as an opportunity to learn and to grow from these setbacks. For instance, automatically something that just comes to mind is we're always trying to implement initiatives, new initiatives, right, here in the city or even with my board. And we know it's not going to work and we're going to fail if you don't engage all communities, if that makes any sense, right? Because sometimes, yes, you're going to have the regulars, is what we call, like people that will always come and you're always going to hear what they have to say, and that's fantastic. But I also want to be able to hear from others. So it's trying to determine, well, how do we reach the underrepresented groups? How do we reach people that perhaps don't have access to internet or whatever it is? And it's happened in the past. And I feel like when we do that, we're not getting the full picture. And to me, it's finding an opportunity to kind of revise our strategy and how we're going to do our outreach and how we're going to engage the community as a whole. And I feel that it does require a lot of adaptability. And I feel like that's when meaningful innovation is going to happen, is when we try and you fail, you try again, and you learn from your mistakes and you learn to pivot and to innovate as you fail.
Innovate as you fail. Yeah, right. That's the way we learn too. Byung-sun?
Yes, I agree to Dr. Maritza. Yeah, in my point of view, failure is a part of innovation. So I frame experimentation as a learning process, encouraging risk taking. And frankly say, I never got angry or criticized my employees. I have some employees in my company, but I never criticize them for the results of their work. And this create a psychologically safe environment, and the members feel comfortable proposing bold ideas without fear of criticism. But it takes time. It takes time. Once we reward, once we criticize, then the result will be very short. But I don't think that's the good way in the long run. So yeah, it takes time.
Yeah, definitely it does. What do you think, Shata?
Well, when you asked the question, I remembered there's a book called Experimentation Matters. And it's by a Harvard professor of business and administration, and I think he's head of innovation as well center in Harvard. He's called Dr. Stefan Tomk, I think. But he actually talks about how innovation happens, and the process of innovation happens because of continuous improvement of an existing product. That said, that the whole idea of experimentation is your engine for improvement. So that's how kind of the whole book is set up, is that if you want to innovate, innovation starts from something that already exists, that you're trying to move it forward, rather than creating something that has never been done. But you can, like these experimental approaches help you move forward. I think that's for me at least, that's a reassuring way of tackling kind of these uncertainties. Like start with the known to slowly move forward.
Right. I love that. Start with the known to slowly move forward.
Mhm.
And Dr. Pete.
So I fully agree with my colleagues in theory with everything that they're saying, and this is how I usually take the same approach, where I find not necessarily difficulties but challenges. Let's say in Greece with this type of approach is in Greece. Greece has the highest degree of social distrust. It also has a very low tolerance to change. And why is that? 20 years of economic crisis where you had 30% unemployment. Before then, you had, a military dictatorship that was put in by the US after World War II, when all of Western Europe was rebuilding. Greece was trying to fight not to be communist. Before that, World War II. So you see, for 200 years after Ottoman liberation, no stability. So any change is feared. So any failure is attacked, right? If you go to make any change within an organization and you're not able to succeed in that change, your rivals will destroy you. So how do you react in this type of environment, right? First, to Bang Song's um, point, to like build that team, right? You build the team around you that has that same mentality, right? But that's only the team that you can control. So then we go into, like, let's say Cotter 7 steps. Well, in our change, in our approach to change, we really start celebrating more of the smaller wins and reassessing far more often, because every failure is that much more of a risk to destroying any other progress that's been made within the organization. And that's goes back to the cultural aspect, right? Knowing history and knowing where society has come from will help you navigate those types of challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Navigating those challenges. Yeah. Thank you all for the best insights that you could provide in that question. I think it's really important to understand um and to know the lessons you've had to learn or how it's impacted your leadership in cross-cultural communication. So let's go to the next question. I'm sorry, innovation. I went right into the previous question. I meant on an innovation and as a leader. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about motivation for a minute here. Um, for those who have to deal with time zones and cultural divides, right? I mean, three of you on the panel are definitely like internationally, dealing with that, of course. And I think I assume that, but Maritza, are you also dealing with like international, like people internationally? Like, do you have to talk to them, talk to people on different time zones? I mean, we have different time zones here in America, but globally speaking.
I have to be honest with you. I don't see that happening as often, at least in my field. The Yes, no, I mean, maybe on the East Coast, because we are on the West Coast, and when we engage with the legislators or other folks, for example, in Washington, DC, that is probably the extent of the time zone changes. And it's just making sure that we're able to find common ground in terms of when and how we can communicate. But as far as internationally, I don't have that experience.
And that's okay because I feel that it's really important to still kind of address it just because we even nationally have different like abilities, not only time zones, but cultural divide. So this next question that I'm asking is, what keeps you motivated when the work gets heavy, slow, or uncertain, especially across time zones and cultural divides? So let me repeat that question. I put it in the chat. And Christina, we'll get to your question too. We'll probably do like a question and answer session, maybe in about half an hour or so. So we'll definitely get to that. But what keeps you motivated when the work gets heavy, slow, or uncertain, especially across time zones and cultural divides? Bianca, I'm going to ask you first, because I do know that you do work across different time zones. Your company that you work with, you're doing the work here while you're in California, right? But then you're also working with people in South Korea, right?
Yeah, but personally, different time zone is not a big deal for me because we assume that the time is different. But I don't want to say how I kept motivated different things. And I have many students I have been training or trained before. And that experience really, reshaped my motivation. Like sometimes students they already grown up and approach me, and then I saw them very successfully grown up, and they completely, they approached all certain areas, and they said, okay, once I listen to your, like, how do I say, speech or class teaching, that reminded me to be a successful person. And now I'm a pharmacist or pilot. So when I had that kind of the experiences, then it motivated me to keep going on my duty. So yeah, time zone is not a matter for me, but yeah. So sorry, it is not.
It's not something that you've had to experience that much. Yeah. What about you, Shata?
Well, I think that's a tricky question depending on where you are in your life. I think in the beginning, your motivation probably are going to be a little bit. I'm not going to be so hard and say superficial, but I actually think it's, you want the fame sometimes. Sometimes you want the financials. But I feel like in certain, but just for me right now, if I'm going to answer, I think what keep me motivating is finding something bigger than me to keep me moving. It's really important that whatever I do right now has a very bigger impact or a bigger kind of connection with something bigger than what I'm doing right now. I feel that that's the only way that moves me forward, especially when you're working with jet lag and time zones, and this is also kind of ties into other questions in terms of where do you get your inspiration? Or for me at this moment is knowing the work I do has a more bigger impact than I can now understand. So, and one day I will be able to comprehend it, but now I have to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. For time's purposes, I'm going to go to the next question. And I think this next question is something that I think we can all really relate to in terms of being part of the Global Leadership and Change program here at Pepperdine. And that is, how has the Global Leadership and Change program shaped your leadership lens or personal growth? Again, the question is in the chat as well. How has the Global Leadership and Change program shaped your leadership lens or personal growth? So anybody can chime in because Maritza, I know you're in the EDD program, and then I know everyone else. I know Dr. Pete, you're an alum. You graduated from the program, and so I would love to hear everybody's perspectives on how this specific program that we have has really shaped, your leadership lens or personal growth.
Well, I can speak on the organizational leadership program. I love that EDD program. I feel like it has just profoundly shaped the way I see leadership. I feel that it's taught me to approach challenges in a more systems thinking mindset, with truly understanding how these policies and culture and our actions, how they all intersect. And also just kind of personally pushing me to really reflect deeply on just me, my identity, where I come from, and how that makes me the leader that I am, so that I could make a positive impact in my community and be able to leave that positive impact or a legacy for generations to come. I feel like it has really reinforced, the value of kind of like my own lived experience as a source of like strength, and be able to advocate for the students and families, at least in my community, as well as for the community that I serve here at work. But I feel like most importantly, the program has reminded me that leadership it's not about being perfect, but about growth. I feel that it's taught me really it's giving me the courage to think outside the box and really try to reimagine what's possible in the communities, both the one that I serve at home as a board member, as well as where I work here in Pomona.
Nice. Thank you. I love that you have that experience with it, especially with the EDOL program. I graduated from the EDOL program first before I got into the PhD program. I agree. It's, and it's definitely, it gives you a stepping stone to what to experience. Then you get into the PhD program and now you're like, oh, there's a whole global aspect to that, you get to learn. So thank you for sharing your experiences. As a graduate, Pete, how would you talk about your experiences?
So I'll actually add to both your points because you mentioned also a little bit about your take on it. So my background, undergrad was in marketing. My MBA was an executive MBA, so very rigid, structured. This is how it is. These are the numbers, right? And what the PhD did is, we had a course on where we talked about systems thinking and just looking at the whole system and just looking at things from multiple perspectives and really just changed the way I process data, right? And now that I teach MBA classes, I bring that into the course to say, look, we're learning about marketing, but let me tell you how marketing also affects human resources, also affects supplies, also affects whatever it could be. So my biggest takeaway was just processing data in a much more holistic way, from the people side, from the cultural side, and just even the leadership and the business side.
Nice, nice. So you're also teaching your students, and you're
Oh,
making.
yeah, like one of the good things is that I started teaching while I was maybe within my first year. I started the program in September of 2019, and then COVID decided to close everything down. And at that time is when I started teaching. So
Mm,
as I was going through this PhD program, I was also teaching at a college in San Diego, and then started teaching online from the States in Athens. And so a lot of the things that I took from my instructors at Pepperdine are very much some of the things that I teach my students. And especially in a country like Greece, I had a student the other day tell me, I don't understand these concepts. I'm from a village of 10,000 people, like from a small town of 10,000 people. Like, I don't this doesn't make sense to me. Okay, well, let me make sense in your understanding of what the world is. And now let's gear it up towards something that would be Nike. He chose Nike as a company to do an analysis on. And so, obviously a big taking for somebody that, it's from a small town.
you said 10,000 people?
Yeah.
That doesn't
It's
seem
actually
very.
a mid-sized city in Greece.
Okay, that's what I was saying. Like 10,000 doesn't seem very small to me. I thought maybe 100, but
Well, I mean, it's definitely not Los Angeles.
yeah. Oh, that's true.
I
But 10,000
mean,
is from that.
LA alone is 22 million people. That's two Greece.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Thank you so much for that perspective. And Shata.
Um, Or I saw the question. I was just trying to think, because I'm in the. You do a lot of reflecting as you do in the end, but I feel like I also have probably a different perspective when I'm done with it. But right now, I feel like it definitely had. I mean, I think we talked about it, Dr. Aisha, before, this whole imposter syndrome that you feel like, I need more, I need to learn more. And I feel right now I'm reaching a point where I'm more, let's say, okay with this idea that, yes, I'm okay as I am. I've learned so much, I've grown. So the whole confidence curve for me has really shifted through this process. There's a lot, like, I appreciate what you just mentioned about this. Like, I also did an executive MBA, and it was very different, the setup, although it was like kind of structured and all that. But I feel like this program specifically taught me more about myself than anything else. And I think that's my best takeaway from this whole experience. Like in my MBA, I will say I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about corporate companies, corporate culture, corporate finance. But this program specifically, although we're talking about global leadership, I think it added a lot to me personally, in terms of confidence, and in terms of as well knowledge, or knowing and being aware of me and myself and my abilities and my thoughts, and what do I add and what can I bring. I think that was very important for me throughout this experience.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. And Byung-sun.
Yeah, certainly this program reshaped me academically, but I'm not sure in here. But anyway, the program significantly expanded my theoretical understanding of leadership, especially like around cultural intelligence and system thinking. Yeah, maybe. And it also reinforced me, like, my commitments to adaptive leadership in diverse cultural settings. There are lots of leaderships, but we can modify, adapt some leaderships each other in specific settings. I learned that.
Nice. Nice. I love that. I love you've all had such great experiences in this program. And that leads me to the next question, which is, what is one piece of theory or research that you now carry with you into every professional setting? So, we've obviously learned so much and so many different theories and so much research, and we've done our own research. I know Shata just mentioned about my imposter syndrome research that I've done, and, we've all done so many different things. So what is one piece of theory or research that you now carry with you into every professional setting? I will go ahead and put that in the chat as well. And would love for all of you to answer this question, because I think it's important, especially for those listening, who are in the program or probably thinking of coming into the program or have graduated from the program, to see what it is that we're really kind of getting into, what that depth is. And so what is that one piece or that theory or that research, or that's something that like sparked motivation and interest in you when as you were learning about leadership, and just that you carry with you?
I've already shared mine. It was systems thinking. Like
System.
every one of my lectures now, not lectures, but every course that I teach, undergrad or graduate, I start off with doing exercise on thinking about everything in systems. Because once you start seeing, at least, you know, even if you're just trying to look at the whole system, then you can start understanding different aspects. And I would argue, even now, and like outside of the classroom, outside of the work, just in our world, if we just understood the system a little bit better, we would probably have far less disagreements, far less like conflict, because a lot of the conflict and disagreements are stemmed from the same types of struggles that people have, just from different perspectives of they're part of that system, which could be whatever it is.
Yeah. So systems thinking. Okay. I like that. I like that. Shanta?
I will add, I mean, system thinking definitely, and Sanjay's working organization. I think that was really the beginning of all, like this whole kind of surprise in this whole PhD. But as I finish, I think, and I see it now in making a big impact on my dissertation, which is intercultural competence. I can't emphasize how that class kind of changed my health. I don't say it probably changed, but like re-emphasize how important this topic is, especially in today's climate, economic, environmental. Like intercultural competence is something that I don't feel we talk enough about, or even practice or understand it. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me from the whole program.
I love that. Maritza?
You know what? My brain automatically took me to appreciative inquiry. And when I think of appreciative inquiry, I think of it not just as a theory, but a model. And I know that when it comes down to change, right, we're always trying to find ways to implement a change. But with appreciative inquiry, it can be something so small that we're trying to implement to something huge, like a huge initiative. I'm maybe because I'm also an optimist, but I feel that through AI, appreciative inquiry, that is, it focuses on a collaborative and a strengths-based approach to change, right? It focuses on the positive and really amplifying what's working well to create that change rather than dwelling on the negative and dwelling on the problems. I feel that using AI, appreciative inquiry, it kind of helps us think and see and act for positive change. It involves just asking questions from our employees, from our community, from our stakeholders, questions and conversations about their vision, their values, like what does success look like to you? I feel like it's a very powerful tool to engage people and really enable them to create some exciting or innovative new changes and realities in our community.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Yes, Lena. So Lena says thinking is systems by Donella H. Meadows that speaks to the importance of understanding systems in order to succeed. Yes, yes. How many of you are in the process of getting your dissertation completed right now? I know Pete, he's already graduated. He's Dr. Pete, but the three of you, I know Byung-sun, you're working on your dissertation. Shata, you're in your dissertation. What level of dissertation are you in right now, Shata? Are you
I'm still in the. No, I'm still in the. This is my first term, so I'm still. Hopefully, let's say I'm in the beginning, but late beginning.
Oh,
So hopefully, yeah, I'm looking at my preliminary next term, somewhere in end of summer.
nice. Loving that. Maritza, what about you?
Also working on my proposal. I am almost done with chapter 2, so I hope to wrap up my proposal this next semester. I've had my own personal challenges at home, so it's taking me a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but I'm still pushing through and I'm very excited. My dissertation focuses on the lived experiences of women of color city managers. It specifically explores the role of mentorship as social capital. So I'm very excited for this. I feel that I could be done hopefully soon.
Well, if you guys need any help with your dissertations, call me. I'll help you out. I know the whole
Thank
process.
you.
So, and I know
You helped me
Byung-sun.
out. Said you helped me out a lot.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And Byung-sun, you are in your dissertation right now too?
Yeah, chapter 3, maybe chapter 3. Yes, I'm working on that.
Yeah. Really, you're all having some really great dissertation topics just based on the things that we're talking about. I can hear that. I think that's amazing. And so the next question that I have that comes to my mind is, how do you see the role of global leaders evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? I think this is a really great question, and I'm going to put it in the chat. how do you see the role of global leaders evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? So whoever wants to answer first, I know you want to think about it for a minute, but I think it's a really good question just because the world is evolving so much in front of us, even today. We see it happening. And so I think it's good to know what we see. Pete, I just saw that you took your mute off, so go for it.
Yeah. All the colleagues on this panel mentioned many different type of competencies. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, global leaders have to excel at these types of competencies. We can see within the last, even 5 days, at least in the US, certain policies that are very much not bridge building, but more or less bridge collapsing. When it comes to trade wars or whomever you want to have an argument with, right? And we're not in a place. This isn't the 90s, right? This isn't the 80s. Like, we're getting to a place where there's a lot more hostility in the world, and so leaders need to start understanding that bridge building is important. Unfortunately, it does seem like, at least on a geopolitical scale, that we're shifting into like these groups of nations that want to do business with each other. So even just how we interact or who we interact with could be changing within the next 2 to 3 years based off of multiple different variables.
Yeah, you're right about that. And there's so many variables going on right now. So absolutely. Who wants to speak? Shraddha, let's have you speak next because I know you have to leave a little bit early.
Okay, that's actually, I think that's one of the most important questions I feel taking away from this whole program, especially being labeled studying global leadership and change. People like rely on you to have really good answers for what's going to happen, what's the future. And I just think, like, going back, I feel like history repeats itself. There's a circular, my dissertation topic is on circular economy, and the social dimensions of it. So I feel like everything for me is in loops and feedback loops, and circularity is very, like, this is how my brain has been functioning. And I feel like there has to be a return into, for what we're seeing right now, there has to be a point where we go back and revisit what we've been doing for the last 5 years. So there's a point that we have to go back. So I think that whoever is going to be taking this role has to really understand what's been done for the last 5 years, having a very deep understanding of history and lesson learned, and we can't kind of afford jumping into this like roles without understanding the history and past, especially right now. Also, I feel like global leaders, right, or leaders in general, have to be global and local at the same time. You can't work, you have to be able to play very well on both stages. And this is the thing I feel critical coming, what we're seeing right now happening in different regions in America, in the Middle East, even in China, and like wherever. I feel like at this point of time, nobody can afford to be a leader without really understanding his situation in terms of the local situation and how it connects or impacts or reflects on the global broader community.
Yeah, very good. Byung-sun, you seem to agree.
Yeah, I learned a lot from your opinions. My point of view, global leaders will increasingly become facilitators of collaboration and inclusion. Emphasize will grown up emotional and cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence is very important for me. I'm working on that area on my dissertation. digital adaptability and ethical responsibility, and also it navigating complexity of global interconnectedness. So facilitators. Mhm.
Facilitators. Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Yeah. And Maritza.
You know, I feel like right now there's so much distrust in government, right? It at least for us and the field that I'm in, I feel like things change day to day. And I think when I think of a leader and how the leader should evolve in 5 to 10 years, my mind also goes to being a bridge builder. You know, I feel like you need to continue to prioritize perhaps equity, inclusivity, systems collaboration, and maybe even move beyond these traditional hierarchical models, right? Where instead we include the community, we include those marginalized voices, so that we can create that positive change and be able to prioritize the needs of the collective versus, again, just one individual. So
Yeah. And you're absolutely right in saying that things are changing daily. Clearly, you know, we're seeing a lot of that shifting happening right now in America, where you know, things are happening from a political standpoint and then from a government standpoint, from a standpoint of leadership, and there's just a lot of that going on. So this leads me to my next question. What leadership competencies do you believe will be non-negotiable in the future? Like, it's a non-negotiable, these competencies have to be there. I'm going to put this in the chat as well. What leadership competencies do you believe will be non-negotiable in the future?
how about humility? Humility. It's the ability to listen, to unlearn, to adapt across differences. I think that's so essential, as well as maybe emotional intelligence. I feel that because we're going through so many challenges right now, people sometimes feel a little discouraged, and I think the unknown gets people very stressed out, and it's just it changes the way we work. And so even learning how to prioritize our employees' well-being and be able to have just courageous vulnerability, where we encourage everyone to be vulnerable and be able to support them and just work beyond some of these challenges that we're faced daily.
So humility and vulnerability,
Mhm.
these are the non-negotiables that you believe are just, they have to be part of that future.
They should.
Yeah, I put that in the chat because I think that is important. And then speaking on humility, I think Byung-Sun was also mentioning something about humility earlier. He said he was going to touch upon it later, and I think
Mhm.
now is the best time to touch upon that.
Yeah, I mean, many things skipped already, but I was in the Philippines as the missionary trainer, and then, you know, missionary training center based on you assume that servant leadership, right? But definitely not, but authoritarian leadership, and we command and order, and the trainees obedience on. Yeah, that's the system of that institution. But I can say dramatically change the system because I never tried to be authoritarian leadership, but servant leadership. I tried to be their side. So I had power to move them here and there, but I tried to be their side. And then when I show my humility to them, it took time, but they changed a lot. That's why, yeah, I also agree with Dr. Merita. Humility, yeah, very important. But I want to say two more things: inclusivity and equity. That's also very important values of global leaders in the future.
Yeah. So you got humility, vulnerability, inclusivity, equity. Shata, What do you think?
All the above and more. Um, I actually feel like the list keep growing, and I don't know who's that person that we're trying to create who has all of these abilities. I would say one thing, giving my my technical background, I think somebody who understands technology is also something, technology and as well as physical and mental strength. If we're going to talk about the soft skills, yes, I feel probably deep understanding of culture. That's something. One of the discussion I remember we had with Dr. Amanda is that there's no global lead. You can't call yourself a global leader if you don't have languages, like the importance of having languages, which is also debatable because, again, you have to have that local and extension, but that if you want to put yourself in that position, one language will not cut it. That if you don't be able to think in multiple different ways, that's what language kind of provides. So that's something I also feel strong about, is having multiple perspective, multiple languages that actually part of that profile.
So having multiple languages, and you're speaking to like the languages of the world, or are you speaking to?
Yeah, languages of the world.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure everybody here speaks more than one language. So I'm just going to do a rough kind of like at least 2 or 3 languages, I'm pretty sure. And I think that's the commonality I see right now, anybody who's entering this space. And it's funny enough, it's like we see now emphasis even in early childhood education, the importance of introducing the languages. It's much easier to introduce at a younger age because you're able to adapt more and kind of to take on more at a younger age in terms of language proficiency and the ability to kind of retain all of this information from a younger age. But it was a discussion we have, Dr. Amanda, and I thought it was probably worth mentioning it here.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. I think too, also a non-negotiable would be emotional intelligence, because if you don't even have the emotional intelligence, you don't have the empathy and the ability to care for others and build relationships, that is a non-negotiable for me, right? And so I feel like we also need to include all of that. So like you said, Shata, whoever it is that we're trying to create, I don't know who we're trying to create, but we're hoping that whoever these leaders are, that they have these values, that they have these competencies included in that leadership, right? So I love how you all answer that. Yes.
I would argue in a different direction. I agree with those as competencies that are very necessary, but in my perspective, especially in current affairs, integrity and accountability. Because if you don't have those, then everything else is somewhat less valuable. Like you can have all the empathy in the world, but if you have no integrity, then it doesn't really matter at the end. Especially where I am regionally, you can see where leaders really don't have much integrity or accountability, right?
Yeah.
There within the last 2 months throughout the Balkans, there have been protests, and I can just name like 3 of them, right? Serbia with the collapsing of the train station, killing like 20 or so students. Train crash in Greece, where the train system weren't working properly. The imprisonment of Imamoglu, the mayor of Istanbul, and taking away his degree so he can't run to challenge presidency, right? So we have and then we go back to the other side of the pond. We're in the U.S., right, where we can probably debate that for hours, right? So if you don't have integrity and accountability in our leaders, then what's the point of anything else, right?
Right.
They set the rules, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
That's
Very agree, yes.
Yeah. All right. So everybody, I'm going to,
I just need to say a quick thank you for everybody.
yes.
I really hate to leave, but I have my last class and I think I need to do a small presentation as well. So thank you so much. And please stay in touch. You'll find my information. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you, Shata. We'll share your LinkedIn with everybody too.
Thank you.
Of
Awesome.
course. Of course. So Shanta has to go to class, and I know Maritza has a work meeting coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and just open it up now to the audience. If you have questions from the panel or for the panel, let's go ahead and start doing that now. And then we want to maybe end in the next about 15 minutes or so. So we'll get that way. It gives everybody time to move to where they need to be. But I just want to say thank you, first of all, to the panel. You have all given some great insights and wonderful answers to the questions that I've asked all of you. And I think that there's just so much value and just so much insight to hear from all of you coming from the different perspectives, of leadership, both nationally, internationally, and so forth. And so I'm going to open it up to the audience. I know, Christina, you asked a question earlier. Would you like to unmute yourself and just ask that same question again?
Sure. Let me try to remember. I think you're talking about cultural diversity, I think.
Yeah, I think your question's in the chat. Hold on, I'm looking.
Yeah, I think my question was for Maritza because like she is at a local level, but LA is so diverse and most other places are more homogenous. And even if they have smaller minority groups, but even with her population of Latinos, like Latinos are so diverse where like language also matters. So just wanted to understand how she felt from a local level, also witnessing a global perspective, because that's sort of what you also experience here.
So was that when we were talking about the language, Christina?
Yes. I think it
Yeah.
was language and time zone and diverse cultural divides.
In our own community. I think if it was about the language, I think I think that's what I had mentioned, right? How for us in my community, which is a predominantly Latino community, where a Spanish speaking community, is so important to create those spaces where they feel heard and valued and understood. I think that it's so important for us to as leaders, at least leaders in my community, to make sure that we are sensitive to that, because I feel that a lot of times it's so it's just so common for folks in our district to want to do just regular business as is and not change or pivot in order to be more inclusive. And I'm very sensitive to that. And everybody, at least in my community, knows that whatever it is that we're trying to do, any change, any policy, whatever, that we do engage the community and not let any type of language barrier discourage anybody from being part of any change or anything that we're trying to bring to our community. Does that answer your question?
No, it does, but I think I was talking more about like the cultural divides that might exist within the communities, like the nuances. Because even within the Latino community, we're not a monolith. I think it's sort of similar for also like the Arab cultures. They're also not a monolith. So I was talking about that like with like Mexican, Salvadoreños, like the diversity that exists. Maybe my question was unclear, so it's okay.
No, and I apologize if maybe I'm not understanding the question.
Can I
Christine, I'm
rephrase your
sorry.
question how I understand it? Like, I think what she's asking is,
Yes.
in your community, they're mostly Spanish speakers, but Spanish speakers doesn't necessarily mean purely Mexican. So there could be
Oh,
multiple
right.
different.
Right.
And so how do you
Absolutely.
address those kind of differences to where there might be a parent language where everybody speaks Spanish, but there are different intricacies between cultural groups? If that's kind of how I understood the question. Okay.
Yeah, and again, it's just creating that space for everyone. We never obviously want to assume that anybody is just one type of culture, whether you're just Mexican or just Salvadoran. But again, it's just trying to create that space for everyone and celebrating the differences even within our own community. And just bringing different programs and activities and everything that is reflective of the community that we serve. So again, it's not just limited to one, but trying to be as sensitive and as inclusive as possible.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from our audience? Everybody's on mute. Nobody wants to ask.
I think I honestly, it's not a question. It's more of a comment to what Dr. Pete just mentioned about integrity, and it really I had it in the chat and I deleted it. It really resonated to me because with me and with my thoughts, because really when it comes to integrity, with all due respect to all of the competencies and the characteristics of a good leader that have been mentioned in the chat and during our discussion, and valuable competencies and skills for sure, and characteristics of more of. But when it comes to integrity, really everything collapses if a leader lacks integrity. So for me, really, integrity is the umbrella under which all of a good leader or a leader's characteristics and skills fall. Christina has your hand. You have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Oh no, for the next question, once you're done.
Please go ahead.
Oh, my question was for Dr. Pete. Well, first I have a comment. I know that you said that you're familiar with from a small Greek community here. I don't know if you're familiar with Papa Christos, but it's closing down and I'm really sad.
I saw that. And I
Yes.
saw Bobby just got off. He's a friend of mine from the Greek community in Long Beach.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention that, but I do have a question for you. You did mention that, the context of Greece, and you talked about the importance of small wins and assessment. And I guess I wanted your take on maybe the relativity of time, because sometimes we tend to focus on how fast we're making progress and how fast we're making changes, right? So in the US, like within these few months, we've seen a lot of changes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's something great. And there's very little assessment, right? So with time, sometimes decision makers tend to shift really quickly, and some countries seem to lag behind. But at the same time, when you understand context and you are able to assess and make those small wins, how do you think that plays out, like long-term for Greece and long-term for some of these countries that are playing a little bit of catch up in the context of how fast the world is moving, but also with some of our decision makers who might lack integrity and that assessment and, like valuing those small wins?
Can I
Yeah, well,
interrupt
I mean-
real quick? I'm
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
sorry. Hate to interrupt, but I have to jump off because I have another meeting, but I wanted to thank you all for having me. It's
Thank
been
you.
an honor and a pleasure. So again, I'm so sorry you have to jump off, but everybody have a great day and a great evening.
You too. Thank you so much, Maritza, for being here. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
To answer your question, so kind of I'm going to break this up into multiple parts. Some of the challenges in Greece are due to generational trauma and things that have happened in this country over the past, let's say, 700 years since the fall of Constantinople. And this isn't, this isn't a unique situation, right? You can go throughout the whole Eastern Mediterranean and the Balkans and find similar instances like this. And I would even argue that in the US, we haven't done a good job of addressing our generational trauma within certain communities as well. So, depending on what is the social agenda, but the social advocacy that we're working on, we haven't really done a really good job addressing that in all of our communities. When it comes to like how now we're talking about like the technological or like the advancement, it's very hard. Like it's funny because I have a friend of mine who's Syrian, moved here before the war, and him and his family went to Dubai for Christmas. And they're like, wow, like this is easy in the future. And then when they came back to Greece, they're like, it's nice to not be in such a developed country because things are simpler here too. And I find that to be a blessing as well because, you know, I have one foot in the US because my parents still live there. And I'm, you know, I think moving here, I've become much more American, where in the States, I was much more Greek. And I guess it's nice to have that delay in modernism in some respects because then the burdens of modernism aren't that necessary, like consumerism, or, you know, when you live in a country where the median salary is $800 a month, it's kind of nice how you don't have to buy a lot of stuff to fit in with the Joneses.
Thank you. I really appreciate your answer.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking it.
All right, everybody. Well, I know that we've got two of our panelists had to leave because they had meetings or class to get to. And so Pete and Byung-sun, I'm really happy that you stayed behind and were able to answer some of the questions from our audience. And I want to thank our audience for being here and for, you know, just tuning in and listening to this amazing panel. This is a part of our final Global Leadership Speaker Series event that we are finalizing as of today. Thank you so much for being on the panel, for giving your insights, for answering the questions that I put out there, and for everybody to thank you for allowing me to moderate this amazing panel. And if you have any other questions or you want to get in touch with anyone of the panelists, send me an email. You can email me. I'll put the email in the chat. Actually, you guys already know my email, but I'll put it in anyways. But email me. For those of you that are listening to this video on YouTube, I have the email in the description. You can send an email over to me. And if you want to connect with Dr. Pete or Byung-sun or Maritza or Shata, or even myself, just let me know and I'll send over the LinkedIn information and whatever else you'd like to know. Again, thank you all so much for being here and for being a part of the Global Leadership Speaker Series hosted here by the Center for Global Partnerships and Learning in association with Pepperdine University's Graduate School of Education Leadership. Education Psychology. What is wrong with me today? I'm really not there. But Education Psychology. Thank you all so much for being here. All right.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having us.